Hello and welcome everyone, Lionheart here, and today I thought I'd give you guys a brief-ish vlog on history, gaming and Total War as response to my previous vlog where I asked you guys, what topics would you like me to do a vlog about while I'm still healing up, on Twitter and Facebook as well. Links to those are in the description. If you, haven't followed them or liked them or whatever, you should. I'm not going to force you though. Force you. No, they're there, honestly. Twitter above anything. I know social networks are annoying and there's so many of them, but Twitter honestly is, I found, quite useful for connecting with YouTubers and, posting quick updates and stuff. So if it's something you haven't given thought to before, perhaps check out Twitter and follow me. But anyway, I thought I'd talk about history, gaming and Total War, and kind of how, for me, the three of them all interlap and are all kind of very big kind of interests for me. And notably kind of that I've just graduated from uni. I've got a degree in history and the medieval world. That's my specialisation, so that's why some of you will realise that I absolutely suck at Roman history. Rome 2 is actually making me look kind of past the game and actually making me research, a few articles and things like that, and have a look at some books to learn more about the factions I'm playing as, the period, because, to be honest, I've either looked at pretty modern history or medieval history, and at university I was really glad that I got to study a lot of medieval history with my degree, because it's a period that really fascinated me. And I remember, I think it was when I was in primary school, one of the first projects we ever had to do in history was to make a Motte and Bailey castle, and I used like toothpicks to make the fence around my castle, and I love that, and I love the kind of the visual learning at that age, obviously, as most people do, but that castle sort of image stayed with me, and it still does now. And one of the first games I ever played on PC was Stronghold, the first Stronghold game. Now, obviously, Stronghold 2 was Stronghold 3 was Stronghold Crusader 2 looks could go either way, but Stronghold 1, even though the graphics, if you played it now, you'd be like, whoa, everything's 2D and flat. It was a brilliant game, and hello, my lord, when you clicked on a peasant was just hilarious. So, as I grew up, that Stronghold was probably one of the big games that I played. Castle building simulator that you could create troops as well and siege other people's castles. And even though Stronghold 2 was a bit, I still played that and I still loved it. I struggled with it. I didn't struggle to love it because I did, because it was essentially still a game where I could build my own castle, which was still huge amounts of fun. Stronghold 3 was a slightly more balanced affair, but it was still alright. But, still that Stronghold 1, I remember playing that for so many hours, and I just loved Stronghold, and just the way that it got me interested in history, and not just because, and not from the kind of the limiting aspect of the, I learned about castles. I actually then kind of got involved in learning the period that it was about, roughly that sort of period of England. Obviously it's a fictional story, but I looked into it, and that's what inspired me. Plus I had great teachers along the way to inspire me and help me, which I think, if you have a great teacher, it does help, motivate you to want to learn more. If you have a crap teacher that's not interested in the subject they're teaching, then, well, one, what the hell are they doing? And two, it just makes you not interested at all. Which is a shame, because there's so many interesting things about history. And yes, even on just the face of it, being able to study about some cool battles and people getting stabbed and killed, and, it is cool. It is really interesting stuff. Obviously, there's all the economics and social factors behind all that, but actually, you start looking into it, and they're all interlinked anyway, and it does all get interesting, and the diplomatic policies and all that sort of stuff. I actually find, on the outset of it, if somebody had told me I'd be studying, the policies of between France and England in the 100 Years' War or something like that, then I would have been like, yawn, let's go, get drunk or something like that. No, it's actually all really interesting, and it all shapes up really interesting. And actually leads me on to one of my favourite periods. Some of you have been asking me, like, what is your favourite historical period? 100 Years' War is probably without a doubt, just because there's so much toing and froing between England and France. The 100 Years' War wasn't actually a war that went on for 100 years. It went on roughly for about 120, 121 years, and it sort of spanned that sort of period. But again, it wasn't 121, or it wasn't 100 years worth of war, consecutively. It wasn't on all the time. There were breaks, there were peace treaties, non-aggression pacts as such, alliances made that, stopped the war for several periods, but England and France were able to hold on to what they'd gained or lost. But the majority, in fact, all of the battles were in France. France never managed to invade England in this period. I'm sure they would have given it a go, but England, made an effort several times, especially in Henry V's Agincourt campaign, to take Normandy, which obviously prevented the French from, invading across from Normandy, where the shortest crossing point at the Channel would be from Calais and things like that. So they took out that option for them, and England were generally on the attack. They were going for the title of the French crown, and obviously I'm not going to go into the whole history of the 100 Years' War because I would be here for 100 years. But it's a really interesting period, and I suggest you look into it if the medieval period takes your fancy, and if it's something you want to learn about, because there's a lot of development in weaponry, both weapons and armor. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that when I talk about what I did for my dissertation, which was a 10,000 word project. It was the final piece of work I had to do at university bar my exams. But I'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, 100 Years' War was just a fascinating period for me. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed it. And I suggest you guys check it out if you haven't. And feel free to share what your favourite period or aspect of history is in the comments section. But I love that because there's so much going on, and it's not just you have eventually the English pull back from trying to conquer France, and France builds itself back up as quite an effective and powerful European country, and from that goes on in the following centuries to do rather well. And it's from basically the end of the 100 Years' War that this happens, and I did essays on that as well. Well, that leads me on nicely to kind of the other thing that I've really enjoyed learning about history, and the thing that links me to Total War, is counterfactual history. Counterfactual history, or rather, what-if history, is a huge passion of mine, and that passion manifests itself in the Total War games for me playing Total War, because for me, Total War has never been about playing a game that's historically accurate, and I don't get annoyed when the flags are the wrong colour or something like that. There's mods that normally change that anyway. But I know a lot of players love historical accuracy, and they want to play they want to play as the Romans did, they want to expand as they did, they want to play as the English did and expand as they did. For me, and it's why sometimes I get people commenting saying, why are you doing this? The English would never have done that. And I go, yes, I know. That's because I'm in control. Because I love doing the what if. I love creating my own campaign, and that's what I love about Total War, because it brings you to a reasonably historically accurate period, and then lets you go, do whatever you want. I really don't care. You could sit there and build up and build up. You can expand everywhere you want. You can kill that guy over there who's your ally and your client state in the first turn if you want, or you can follow the textbook as such. You can follow the annals of history and do whatever you want. It's totally up to you, and that's what I love about Total War games, because for me, growing up with them, it inspired me to look at the period that I was playing in, essentially, and then go, oh, they did this. I wonder what happens if I do that, though. Just because I found that so fascinating. And that's why I love counterfactual history and what if history. And I did several essays on counterfactual history. One, looking at what if, in particular, what if the French had won the Battle of Agincourt and not the English under Henry V? And the thing you've got to be careful with counterfactual history is, you could say, what if Hitler had won World War II and he conquered the whole world and we're all speaking German now? Sprechen Sie Deutsch? But, that's, for me, you can propose that counterfactual, but you would have to do so many little decisions, and you'd have to, make account for all the other characters, all the other, people that would get involved within that counterfactual. It's essentially you're creating an alternate reality. So you can't just develop one character, one faction, or one key thing. You have to take into account all the other decisions that are going to change, or that would need to change because of you changing one thing. So when I proposed what happens if the French had won the Battle of Agincourt, the ultimate proposal I got up to was that France, at this point, after losing the Battle of Agincourt in actual history, it took them another 30 years to really get strong enough to repel the English effectively enough that they pushed them out, and the English never came back, really. But then it took them another 40 years. It was about 1450 when they managed to push the English out and push them back from Calais. But it was pushed them. Got rid of all their territories bar Calais. It was much later on when they actually lost Calais. But yeah, they pushed them all out of France, bar Calais. And then from 1450, it took them another 40 years really to become strong enough to get involved with wars against Spain and Italy and launch campaigns there. So I was looking at the question of kind of what if France had won Agincourt? Would they become a powerful European player again? a lot earlier, what would have happened? So my eventual proposal was probably that by 1450 they would have been strong enough to launch an invasion against England. I didn't say that they did launch an invasion, I just proposed that they could have done, but my counterfactual ended there, because if I then said that they went over, they invaded, I'd then have to start going, well, how would, the Henry VI or something like that, how would he reacted, how would he have marshalled his forces, would they all have just beaten the French back straight away, or would, while that was going on, would they have counter-invaded or something like that? It gets into the kind of the ridiculous stage of history, because it becomes too much from what is a possible history to complete fiction. And counterfactual, I personally believe, isn't about creating fiction, it's about creating plausible reality or plausible history. So you have to do small changes. If anyone's ever done that, or what if, feel free to comment as well, saying what would be your ideal counterfactual history that you'd like to see, or your ideal what-if scenario. But for me, that's why I love the Total War series, because it allows me to go, I'm going to do that, and I don't care that history said I did that. And that's what I love about it, but I do feel that you have to be careful and cautious with counterfactual history in an academic sense, because it often does, by other academics, get sort of poo-pooed on, because they go, well, you just made everything up. So if you do it small and carefully and actually back it up with kind of what could potentially happen, you're looking at what actually did happen, and then just tweaking a few things, you can actually do it quite realistically well. And that's what I really enjoyed learning about. But to be able to do all that, you have to know the actual history first. You have to learn from what happened. But yeah, that's what I love the Total War games mainly. And that's why I love, creating content for you guys. Even on things like Third Age, obviously doing the counterfactual with the Elves of Lorien, rather than being sort of sitting there the whole game going, yeah, we had Haldir, but then he died. What up with that? We helped out a Helm's Deep, geez. Whereas me at the moment, I'm going, I will save everyone. And, even in, obviously, Rome 2 and things like that, can do whatever I want. Iceni conquering the world. Woo! Or Sparta, even. And Rome is actually probably going pretty historically accurate, although we've got that civil war going on, which we need to crush. But anyway, so that's why I love the Total War games. But I wanted to finish off by talking about my dissertation, which was about the longbow. And I will, when I get a chance and when my arm's not in a sling, probably around Christmas time, I will put online an edited, a shortened down version, and kind of a revised version as well for you guys to have a read of, and let me know your thoughts, because I'd be interested to see what you guys think, and I know a lot of you actually want to read it. And my dissertation was looking at the legacy of the longbow. So it was looking at some of the battles of the 100 Years' War, such as Crécy, Poitiers, Agincourt, where the longbow was used for the first time effectively and en masse. And you have aspects such as, was Crécy the death of French chivalry, because previously, before that, generally a knight fought against a knight, single combat sort of thing, that was kind of the honourable way of doing it. It was the chivalric way. But at Crécy, the English archers, which were yeomanry or, just standard peasants, they weren't of any higher class, they weren't knights, were able to bring down the horses and some of the knights themselves and inflict severe casualties into the French. And, they were just like, well, that's not fair. But then war is not fair at all. But that's where the French learnt it kind of the hard way, that they couldn't expect the English to, send their knights against them, honourably if they were outnumbered, just because they'd lose. They fought tactfully, and they fought very effectively, and they used their longbowmen, they used their assets and their units very well. They would be a very, very hard AI to beat on Total War. But yeah, so I love that at Crécy when that happens, and from the thing is, the biggest thing I found on the kind of the military themes of studying the legacy of the longbow was that some historians were saying that actually the longbow wasn't that effective at all. At Crécy it might have been a bit more effective, but at stuff like Agincourt in particular, it was the mud that brought the men down, that tired them out, and that did the damage. That was the infantry that did the majority of the killing. And they're saying that the arrows would have just glanced off the knight's armour. The armour that was developed and that was around for France in 1415 was radically redeveloped from the armour that was in the middle of the 14th century. So like 1340, 1350, sort of after Crécy and Poitiers, because the articles and there's the chronicles to support this, that the French radically redesigned and improved their armour. They spent a lot of time researching and redeveloping their armour technology in response to the English longbow, in response to the longbow being used by the English and it being effective. Surely you wouldn't develop armour to be more effective against a weapon that wasn't effective. That was my basic argument there, which again, when my dissertation goes up, you can read the full thing, because I won't go into it now because there's too much to go into then. I could be here for an hour debating with you why I think the longbow actually was effective and not as some historians say that it wasn't. That's not to say that the longbow was this, you know, epic killing weapon that just knocked down enemies like Lord of the Rings, you know. Infantry at Agincourt ultimately were the ones that did the majority of the killing, but the longbow slowed and deterred the enemy cavalry. It slowed down their troops having to raise up their shields and have their visors down, so it limited their visibility. So it all contributed to allowing the English to, you know, gain victory. So it was a very well tactically used and employed weapon. But I look beyond that, because I was saying, well, we know the military legacy of the longbow. We know it was, you know, Agincourt, Crécy, Poitiers, you know, well, hey, the longbow, it did great in these battles. But why do we kind of still remember it today? Was it just because of those battles? Or was there something more that we gained out of it? Was there kind of some sort of social importance and that instilled within the English people? And so I looked beyond, you know, the military stuff and looked at some of the imagery that was drawn up through the ballads and songs, but notably how I eventually concluded was saying that the English longbow, in a social aspect, because there were various laws across the centuries in England to enforce the practice of archery, to basically ensure that that England rather had a well stocked sort of supply of men that could wield the longbow effectively and that were effective with it. Because there's varying accounts that you needed 4 to 5 years to be strong enough to, you know, pull the longbow back and to be accurate with it. So I looked at kind of the social convention of the longbow, not just the practice during times of war and kind of the early 13th and 14th centuries, but also the 16th and 17th centuries, when archery became a recreational sport and the longbow was prized for its range and, you know, the skill that you had to have with the longbow. Archery tournaments, you know, the institutions that were formed up, the archery butts for practice, tournaments that were held and, you know, sponsored by kings and things like that. So, you know, kind of the impact of archery. And eventually I ended by, you know, saying that the longbow, its legacy carried on through kind of the creation of a communal area, the communal village green almost, because that's where archery was practiced, at the archery butts, which became the village green. You know, people came there to play for leisure and to practice archery and for archery competitions, and obviously that redeveloped, but you have even to this day recreational archery associations which date back 300-400 years, some of them, and I just found that incredibly fascinating. So I looked at the legacy of the longbow to look beyond the military stuff, like to recognise its military achievements, because there's no way you can't say, you know, that it was at Agincourt. It was at Agincourt, and the heralds and chronicles, you know, they document, oh, the hail of arrows from the English longbowmen, they were doth great, you know. But I want to look beyond that to find out, you know, I was perfectly happy to end my conclusion by going, it was just a great military weapon, and it did good. I wanted to know if there was another reason, so it's kind of this social aspect of it. But anyway, that's for another time. I hope you've enjoyed this rambling. I know I've rambled on a bit and stuff, but I still wanted to give you an insight about some topics which you guys wanted to know about that, you know, that are very personal to me, but it's kind of why I do what I do and why I enjoy what I enjoy. But yeah, so let me know in the comments if you've got any, you know, queries, questions, things to add, debates to begin and start, and flame wars. No flame wars. Be gentle, be nice. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. Hopefully, I'm not going to make any 100% promises, but hopefully going to be back to my normal schedule as of Monday. Now, I know some of you probably have been jumping up on my other videos going, wait until it's properly healed, Leonhard, wait till it's healed. And I am. I'm not going to, you know, if it's hurting while I'm trying to record, I'm not going to continue. You know, I'll have more time off, but I want to get back to recording. I miss recording my campaigns. I want to see how they turn out. I really want to see how the Rome Civil War comes out. And how Sparta progresses, how Iceni storms down, how the Elves of Lorien do, how Harad does, how Batman gets on, for God's sake. So yeah, go check out the Batman series. It's heavily underwatched. Go check it out if you want to see something completely different, basically me mucking around as Batman. That's on my channel in a playlist. But yeah, no, I don't worry, I'm not going to push myself if I'm not ready. If it isn't better, then I won't. I've got an appointment with the Fracture Clinic on Tuesday, So they'll tell me when I can kind of start doing everything else. But for now, it's actually I'm not in any pain just resting it here, and in a mouse position, it's actually quite manageable. So hopefully on Monday, expect to see some videos. I'll hopefully talk to Air of Carthage this weekend as well to arrange some more co-op, because obviously we missed one last weekend because I was like this and like, it hurts. But yeah, if you want to see any more vlogs in the meantime between now and Monday, I don't know if I'll have a chance to, but there'll be a Hear Me Roar on Sunday. But yeah, if you want any more topics covered, then let me know in the comments as well, and I'll get to them. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this this vlog on history, gaming, and Total War. I will see you all again soon, and yes, hitting 50,000 subscribers soon, so an early thank you, one and all. Ciao for now.